Hello and welcome. You're watching To The Point. The big news today is that Prime Minister Modi has accepted an invitation to visit Washington for a one-day summit with President Obama in September. How significant is this development, and what steps are needed to put the troubled relationship with America back on the rails? That's the discussion in part 2. But first, the deeply troubling lack of response to a development that has shaken the country. 3 days have passed, but no one in Prime Minister Modi's government has said a word about the cold-blooded murder of a young 24-year-old man in Pune, killed simply because he had a beard and therefore looked like a Muslim. Is this not a matter that demands the strongest condemnation? And what is the silence from Delhi? And now joining me to talk about the tongue-tied response to a gruesome murder is BJP spokesperson Shaina NC, Congress spokesperson and MP Shashi Tharoor, the well-known sociologist Dipankar Gupta, and the well-known theatre personality Amir Raza Hussain. Shaina NC, there's been a horrific killing in Pune, where in a cold-blooded murder, a young Muslim boy was battered to death, allegedly by members of the Hindu Rashtra Sena, only because he had a beard, and therefore to them looked like a Muslim. And yet no member of the new government in Delhi has had a word to say about this. How do you account for this deafening silence?
I think it's absolutely shocking and appalling, to say the least. I feel that we need to not just condemn this issue at a national level, state level, but we have an extremely incompetent government at the state which looks into law and order, which has chosen not to attach itself or even take stands, or for that matter, we have not even had a statement from the Home Minister. It's not like I'm passing the buck, but I want to please say on record that any splinter group that so-called attaches itself to the BJP is not connected to the BJP. We have nothing to do with any of these Senas or so-called moral brigades, or for that matter, any Hindu fundamentalist organization, and likewise have been no attachment to any extremist organization itself. We pride ourselves in saying that we are a government that wants to give a good governance model, wants to ensure that every citizen is secure, irrespective of his or her so-called physicality or look or appearance.
Two quick questions from me. You began by saying that this silence was shocking and appalling. I want you to confirm that those words were used about the silence from the government in Delhi.
Yes, Karanji, I was on a telephonic conversation with our Prime Minister, and we as a government completely condemn it. We have nothing to do with any of these splinter organizations. However, you have to concede that law and order is subject, and it is an incompetent government in the state of Maharashtra which has chosen to put on blinkers. Whether it's cybercrime, hate crime,
I take your point.
Sort of crime.
Can I interrupt? Because this is not about the government in Maharashtra. I applaud you for having confirmed that you call the silence from Delhi, and that is from your own government in Delhi, shocking and appalling. I applaud you for that. But one other quick question before I move on. The BJP MP from Pune, Anil Shiroli, has not condemned this. He's actually suggested justifications for it. He's told another channel that he believes that the murder was natural and to be expected, and that's a BJP MP saying it. How strongly do you condemn Mr. Shiroli?
The BJP absolutely condemns anyone who is not a law-abiding citizen, anyone who chooses to take law into his or her hands as moral guardians, guardians, is all highly despicable.
But are you also condemning, forgive me, I'm interrupting you, but are you also condemning Mr. Shiroli, who seemed to justify the murder? Are you condemning Mr. Shiroli?
I have not read this statement. However, if you say that he has said it, it is absolutely wrong, only because this is a young student. We encourage freedom of expression. At the same time, there is something which is highly arguable and questionable when it comes to issues of national pride.
I must interrupt you again. Forgive me. I don't like interrupting you, but the young student who got murdered, battered to death, is not in any way responsible with the or for the derogatory references on Facebook to either Shivaji or Bal Thackeray. The police have confirmed they have no idea who is responsible for those. So there's no way you can actually at this moment with any proof connect him to that. I just want to point that out. Shashi Tharoor, the murder happened on Monday night and 3 days have passed. Although we've heard Shaina NC tonight say that the silence from Delhi is shocking and appalling, nonetheless, people expected Mr. Modi himself to speak up or his government to speak up, particularly because of 2002 and particularly because with his RSS Pracharak past, people thought it would be in the interest of Mr. Modi's government to come forward with a clear and forthright condemnation. What's your opinion on that?
Yes, I think they should, in fact, because this is an issue compounded by the fact that the thugs who did this horrendous murder did so very simply because they claimed to be standing up for something they called the Hindu Rashtra Sena, on top of which they attacked an individual merely because he was obviously Muslim, emerging from a namaz and with a beard. It seemed to me that this was a kind of hate crime that goes beyond the local law and order concerns to a national concern, and it would have been helpful if the government at the highest levels had made it clear this is not the kind of India they wish to preside over.
Now, Dipankar Gupta, beyond politics, isn't there a moral duty on any government, and I suppose on the national government in particular, to speak out when something as horrific as this happens?
I think you're right, because the national government has just been elected on the back of a huge majority, and it is also trying to undermine its earlier reputation, in which case I think it would have been just the right thing for the government to do, for Mr. Modi to do, in fact, Prime Minister Modi, to step out and say that he condemns this horrific incident. I remember Mr. Mitterrand in France. He encouraged a large number of volunteers and activists to march down the streets of Paris when there was a crime against some Jewish people, and he in fact welcomed them in the palace and gave legitimacy to this demonstrations in defense of the Jewish people in France. And I think it would have been a very good idea on Modi's part if he did a similar thing, because he's been saying all along his entire election campaign, the reason why people were impressed by him was that he didn't seem to refer to any communal hatred or anything of the kind. In fact, he said, I want to be the leader of the nation, I want to be the leader of the people of India. So in that case, of course, I think it would have been a wonderful gesture on Modi's part if he encouraged some of his volunteers to lead a huge demonstration in Delhi, leading right up to his house, and he would welcome them there. Having said that,
can I interrupt you? You're talking about what would be wonderful if he had done it, but he hasn't done it. So what we have instead from Mr. Modi is deafening silence, and to be honest, we have deafening silence from the entire government in Delhi.
I think that is terrible. I think the government in Delhi, of course, you can say it is Maharashtra's problem and the state government, the rest of it. But as I said to you earlier when I began my response, is that this government has just come to power. There's so much riding on this government, a lot of hopes on this government. And this government would do itself a huge favor if it were to come out openly and condemn this attack, whether or not it is a state subject or central subject. That should not come in the way.
Amir Raza Hussain, how do you as a Muslim, who not so long ago was also a vice president of the Delhi Bharatiya Janata Party, view the government's silence?
I think in the last 10 years we've got used to government being silent, or at least the highest echelons of government being silent on a whole lot of not just hate crimes, but a whole lot of problems that have beset the country. And it is only after the press has really woken up their conscience that they have actually responded to it. Mr. Modi, we expected was to be different. He brought in a breath of fresh air into the Prime Minister's office. He brought in a whole lot of new energy into the Prime Minister's office, and he is in the habit of tweeting about almost everything of consequence. And I'm surprised that a matter like this would miss his interest or miss his notice unless it is deliberate. So that is what we have to wonder about, that it certainly cannot be, as it was in the last government, that it was just a matter of sitting back and not taking any notice of what was happening. Mr.
Okay.
Modi takes notice of everything. This hate crime could not have missed his notice. And if he hasn't reacted to it, then I think perhaps there's a bit of a problem.
You know, Shaina
But I
NC, you
am hopeful
probably...
that he will react to it soon.
Shaina NC, you've heard that last comment from Amir Raza Hussain that Mr. Modi doesn't hesitate to tweet on a variety of subjects. He tweets 3 or 4 times a day sometimes. Yet on this, he's completely quiet and silent. Isn't that a bit strange? That a man who regularly tweets and keeps in touch has chosen silence when something as horrific as this has happened.
Currently, first, let me please just clarify, because I have got on record here what Mr. Anish Shirole said. Coming back to your previous point, he said the people of Pune want peace. What was posted on Facebook was sad. It was bound to have some repercussions. However, this was not right. So factually, please be put on record that our Member of Parliament from Pune has not sided with hate crime in any way.
What about my question about Mr. Modi? What about my question about Mr. Modi? The fact that he tweets 3-4 times a day on a variety of subjects, but on this issue, there's silence.
You as a journalist and a senior journalist would know more than anyone else that 2014, this election was not won on divisive politics.
No, Shaina NC, let's not go back into what the election was won on. Please, answer my question. The people of India want you to answer the question. They want to hear what the BJP has to say in response to the fact that Mr. Modi can tweet on 4 or 5 subjects a day, but on this issue, which has shaken the country, there is silence. Answer that.
Why are we the spokespersons to do exactly that? To enhance and to reach out to public and to tell them what the party stand is.
No,
and the
Shaina
party
NC,
stand is to ensure that
how come then Mr. Modi doesn't want the party stand known on this horrific murder? Why don't you answer that question, please? You were so good earlier. You were so forthcoming and honest earlier. Suddenly you become defensive.
But I am. I continue to be so. And my point is that if you expect the Prime Minister of this country to respond on every single issue, but the point is, it would happen at the opportune time once he has this report from the government, from the Maharashtra government, to know exactly what the facts are before he goes on.
All right. Thank you. Let me stop you there. I'm going to go to Dipankar Gupta with that. Dipankar Gupta, when she began, Shaina NC unhesitatingly said that the silence from Delhi, and that's the Modi government, was shocking and appalling. When I asked her to confirm she meant the Modi government, she readily confirmed that she did. Now, she's saying that the Prime Minister can't comment on anything and everything that happens in the country. He needs to wait for the Maharashtra government to give him a report. Only then will he comment on this subject. What do you make about that shifting position from just one lady in just 10 minutes?
I think really you have to ask her that question. I was really quite impressed with the fact that Ms. Shaina came out the way she did and didn't really hold back her criticism of the government in not speaking up. I think that is something that one should hang on to, and maybe that will be a way of pressuring the government to react very, very promptly. It's all right to say that we are waiting for the police report and stuff like that. That may be procedure, I don't know. But the fact of the matter is that we all have seen on television and read in the newspapers where a dreadful thing has happened in Pune. In Pune, it's not the backwaters, it's the Pune. And that's why I believe that it would be in the fitness of things. It would be in keeping with Modi's position and posture during the election campaign to come out and say, well, we'll get the police report in time, but listen, I am against it. I've always been against it. I never will stand for it. And I'm going to punish those who have done this, and I will do everything possible. And what is more, I'm going to lead a charge, an ideological charge rather, where I'll have people walk the streets, march the streets, and protest against such kinds of hate crime.
You know,
that would be wonderful.
Amir Raza Hussain, a lot was made when Mr. Modi said on May the 16th, after winning that stunning election victory, that he would be everyone's Prime Minister, including those people who hadn't voted for him. Before that, if you recall, Rajnath Singh actually seemed to apologize for 2002, and he then pleaded with Muslims to try the BJP at least once. Now, at this moment, you suddenly get the feeling that all of that's been forgotten.
I really think that, even if there was no great statement, just a small expression of regret, a one-line tweet would have gone very far in letting people know that Modi has probably got his heart in the right place. That's all that was required. Just an expression of regret. And it's still early days. Who knows? Maybe the Prime Minister will see it fit to come out with it in the next 2-3 days. But I think that was all that was probably required. And he has a long time to prove himself on the kind of assurances that he has made and the kind of statements that he has made, saying that he is Prime Minister for all Indians. Well, we would like him really to walk the talk.
Shashi Tharoor, there's been a lot of talk in the last fortnight of how some people believe they're witnessing a new Mr. Modi. In fact, today's papers, quote, you two have said that you believe Mr. Modi has remade himself from a hate figure into an avatar of modernity and progress. You're also quoted to have said that you believe we are seeing Modi Mark II. Now, in the light of Mr. Modi's silence on an issue where everyone thought he would speak out, doesn't your comment seem somewhat premature?
Except that it's not an accurate paraphrase, as it very rarely is. When our media takes a long and complex argument and tries to summarize it, it usually gets it wrong. So I'd refer people to the original article in which I said that Mr. Modi is trying to remake himself from a hate figure into an avatar of modernity and progress. And that attempt is what we have seen since the 16th of May with his conciliatory and accommodative and inclusive language. And I felt it would be churlish of me not to acknowledge that he's been saying all the right things since his victory. But certainly the message does not appear to have reached all the way down to the bottom rungs of his fellow travelers. And in fact, when I expressed my condolences on behalf of the Congress Party to the family of young Mohsin Sadiq Sheikh, who was killed in Pune, I also urged the Prime Minister and his party to ensure that the language Mr. Modi is giving us is actually reflected all the way down the chain of his supporters. To my mind, it's very important that Mr. Modi continue this effort to be a figure of development and not a figure of divisiveness, not the man whom we had reason to criticize and attack and fear for a dozen years from 2002. Today, we may be seeing, that's what the article I wrote said, we may be seeing the evolution of Modi 2.0. But in that case, it seems to me that the evolution must not be only at the top, it must go right down to the very bottom rungs of the Sangh Parivar.
Shaina NC, you know, when we began this program, I applauded you for being so honest and so forthright in saying that the silence from Delhi was shocking and appalling. In that spirit that you had when you were so honest and upright, I want to ask you another question. Would you accept that for many people, not just Muslims, by the way, not just minorities, but for many people, this is a test for the Modi government, both Mr. Modi and the government, and so far, they've been very slow to respond?
I feel currently you have completely misconstrued exactly what I'm saying. Point continues. It's a horrific crime. It needs to be condemned. It's shocking. I'm ashamed that this has happened in my home state of Maharashtra. But clearly, it is state subject, law and order. We have seen no proactiveness from here. As far as the BJP goes, as spokespersons have been doing since yesterday, we have been saying that irrespective of physicality, irrespective of appearance,
can I interrupt? Can I interrupt? Unfortunately, you're doing what you did a moment ago, distancing yourself from what I applauded you for having done, which is to criticize your own government. But listen to your words. Listen to your words. You accept this is horrific. You accept it's shocking. If it is horrific, shouldn't the Prime Minister of India, who's not just the political leader, but the moral leader of this country, shouldn't the Prime Minister of India voice his sense of horror at what's happened? A young 24-year-old boy battered to death because people saw he had a beard and mistook him for being Muslim, when they have no reason, leave aside proof, to believe that he's responsible for the derogatory references on Facebook to either Bal Saheb Thackeray or to Shivaji. Absolutely no reason for believing it whatsoever, and he's been battered to death. It's a gratuitous killing. Shouldn't then the moral leader of the country, in your own words, when it's so horrific and shocking, express some condemnation?
But is that opinion supposed to be as an opinion for the media? Is it supposed to be for public perception? Or is it supposed to be by his good deeds of political will and ensuring that every Indian is secure?
The country wants to hear the leader of the country speak out at this moment. Mr. Modi has a country who wants to hear what he feels.
The country knows that Mr. Modi is only talking development. He is only talking about security of every Indian, irrespective of their caste, community.
I'm going to stop you there, Shaina NC, because I want people to remember that great start, not the way you've tried to get out of it thereafter. Maybe I embarrassed you by underlining and repeating what you said and made it difficult for you to stand by it. If I did, that was an error on my part. But I want to remind people that you began not just once, but twice confirming that you thought the silence from Delhi was shocking and appalling, and I applaud you for it, even if after that you've had to wheedle out of your position. But let me put the opposite to you, Shashi Tharoor. Are we making too much of one incident? The media has a tendency to do that. Are we making too much of one incident?
Well, we would have been if we blamed Mr. Modi for it, because very clearly you can't. He has not, in the last couple of weeks, said or done anything that can be described as inciting the kind of atmosphere of bigotry and intolerance that clearly led these goons to do what they did. But the fact is that there is a history to all of this. And we have seen for the last 3 decades in India the awakening of a certain religious bigotry on the Hindu side, which as a Hindu myself, I find totally out of keeping with the values and principles and behavior with which I was brought up in a Hindu family. So clearly, some who have claimed to speak for Hinduism have attempted to inculcate a sense of almost pathological hatred of Muslims, or at least of people of other faiths, in certain kinds of Hindus who are susceptible to that thinking. And in that effort, many of those in government today were complicit in the past. So they cannot totally escape their responsibility for calling for condemning this and for calling for more restrained and sensible behavior in the future. In particular, you may know that the reaction allegedly was to a Facebook post, where the answer to a word is a word, it is not a blow, and the answer to an opinion is not murder. And this must be conveyed up and down the chain if our country is to be the India that we all knew and loved.
Dipankar Gupta, let me in a sense play devil's advocate to the line of questioning I've adopted so far. Is the government's silence really a serious development, as I've been suggesting, or just one of those small incidents that keep happening in India and which will soon pass and inevitably also soon be forgotten?
Well, most governments have been remiss on that account. They've never, reacted with alacrity. They've let things slide and then hoped for the best, and people would remember. But my point is simply this, that this was a great opportunity for Mr. Modi, though it is not as if, as Shashi said, it is not as if Mr. Modi is directly responsible for any of this, but it's an opportunity he should have seized. I mean, that is my reading. I'm not a political person, but in my reading, I think Mr. Modi would have just jumped at it and said, here it is, this is my chance, let me nail this lie about me. I think that would have been wonderful. And the other thing is that let's not get wrapped up in what is proper Hinduism and not Hinduism. There are all kinds of Hindus, all kinds of Muslims and Christians, and some of them are so bigoted that, it's unbelievable. So there are Hindus and Hindus, there are Muslims and Muslims, and I don't think there's any such thing as a perfect Hindu or Muslim. But the most important thing is that we are all citizens of the country, and as citizens, we demand that we be treated with justice and with respect.
Okay. Amir Raza Hussain, this horrific incident happened in Pune, the cultural capital of Maharashtra. In May, the BJP Shiv Sena alliance won an astonishing 42 out of 48 seats in that state. In October, that's just 3 months down the road, they hope to win the state elections. What message is the silence from Delhi sending to the 10.6% Muslim community of that state?
Well, I think the message from the government in Delhi is a little unclear at the moment. But, before I come to that, really, I wish to reply to the question which you put to Shashi just now. Is it that we are overreacting to one such instance? But, if people like you in the press do not make a big thing about one incident. There will be one incident followed by 2, followed by 5, followed by a whole orgy of violence. So I think really the time to make a big thing about it is really right now, when there has been only one incident. Why should we wait for this to become a wave before the press wakes up? The politicians wake up late, we know about that. But I think this is the right time for the press to wake up. I think this is the right time you are asking questions. I think it is the right time you are showing a mirror to the government that has taken over in the last 20 days. I think this is the right time you are sending them a message saying that, look, you've got elections in 3, 4, 5 states in the next few months, and there is a large section of minority population in those states. Don't you want them to? Become voters for you? Don't you want to carry them on with them? These are questions which the government really should answer. But I'm so glad that people like you are putting these questions and putting them in perspective.
Thank you, Amir Azor. Sir, let me just point out that, in fact, on Monday we began this week by asking a question about the fact that Mr. Modi's government had got off to a flying start, and we asked, many people believe that in fact we're witnessing a new Mr. Modi. Is that a fact or is it not? Given that we were prepared to do that Monday, it makes only sense that we should be prepared to ask the opposite question today when the circumstances so warrant. That, I believe, is the essence of what journalism is about. Ask the questions that need to be asked, ask them fearlessly, and allow people to answer them fearlessly and completely.